Well, hello there, everybody. My name is Michael Osinski.
And I'm Tyler Esselman.
And you are listening to This One Goes to 11.
This One Goes to 11 is our podcast, where we invite a person on each week to make their case for what they believe is a perfect album.
So perfect that 10 out of 10 is not good enough.
It's not.
It
is not.
No, no.
So, Michael, you spend some time around the youths, don't you?
I do, yes.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you knew that, fashion, it's always changing, right?
I've heard.
It's a constantly evolving force of nature, cultural force of nature.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you knew that skinny jeans are out and sort of like wide bag. They're not saying baggier, but like just sort of like looser fitting pants are back. Did you know that?
Yeah, boot cut, I think.
You're
well,
aware?
that's part of the wide.
Mhm.
I mean, I was never able to fit into skinny jeans. So
Yeah.
like that was a trend that went right past. I tried one time and I'm
Sure.
like, I'm a pretty skinny guy, but I got some thick thighs. So
Yeah, I feel like I tried and it was not. I did it and it wasn't good as I look back on it. But we all make those mistakes when we're young. So it just got me thinking: what fashion trend are you really dreading coming back?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, like if I think if we go back into like the bright neon colors, like the sort of like 1980s Ocean Pacific, where like I'm not a huge fan of like bright neon colors, and I feel like that was recently back for maybe a hot second. I don't know if it still is though.
It was a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's the polo shirts for me too. Like that was the big thing around the skinny jeans time, was like the American Eagle polo shirts and the popped collars thing. Do you remember when people were wearing multiple polo shirts? Do you remember when that was? Obviously, it was just douchebags that were doing that. But like,
Right.
do you remember that?
I vaguely remember. I remember the pop collar more than the double polo.
It was absolutely insane. And if some fashion sub sect tries to reclaim that, I'm gonna be upset.
That strikes me as like Abercrombie on Coke, which is maybe
exactly
might be redundant in saying that, but I was never able to walk into an Abercrombie, like for two reasons. One, I would, if I were to walk in, like the host would sort of look at me like, "Oh, you're coming in here," and I'm like, "No, thank you. I spent most of my life being judged by my peers. I don't need you to do that too, lady." So anyway,
my money's as green as yours.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway.
Well, tell you who's not judgmental and who's very sweet and is just a real gem is our guest today. Michael, who are we speaking to today?
We are talking to the lovely Sarah Bell.
Sarah Bell. Sarah is an actor, director, and producer based in Los Angeles, where she lives with her wonderful husband and sweet, doofy dog. Hailing from the Midwest, listening to music was an essential tool to surviving the trials and tribulations of adolescence and early adulthood and those awful Midwest winters. Heard you there, girl. As a result, Sarah considers crafting playlists for characters to be a natural part of her artistic process, and even has soundtracks dedicated to specific moments of daily life, such as starting the day, riding her motorcycle, or working out. Coming from a family of artists, she has a wide variety of musical tastes and a lot of opinions. So I was really looking forward to diving into why this is her perfect album. She's great, isn't she? This is a fun one.
Yeah. It's a fun one and this is one of those episodes where you might look at the title and say, "Oh yeah, that artist," and be like, "That album?" ? So, yeah.
But she's game too. That she doesn't say she's game, but she's up for a fight. This Sarah, I respect that about her.
Yeah. Oh yeah, most definitely.
She brought the heat.
Yeah. Well, why don't we bring the heat to them, to the listeners, to you? Shall we do that?
Let's do it with just warming up.
Oh, okay. Here we go.
Without any further ado, Sarah Bell, welcome to This One Goes to 11. How are you today?
I am so good. Thank you for having me.
We did it finally. You have been very clear about the fact that you have very very clear opinions on your involvement with this podcast, and I appreciate that.
That's such a nice way of saying that I have been harping you to get me on this show so I can talk about the albums that make me feel things.
Yes. That's what it's all about.
We appreciate that passion. We don't want anyone like, half-assing it on this podcast.
No.
Like,
No.
No, it's
have
a whole
real
ass pod.
feelings.
Yeah.
Full feelings.
Full on feelings. Well, so I will say, I'll just put it out right out front that we already spoke about one of your favorite albums, and you were displeased at that when we talked about AM by Arctic Monkeys.
Yes.
And that
certainly
is your-
not at the podcast, not at the episode itself, but just the
Yeah.
fact that it was already taken. That is my absolute favorite album of all time.
Okay, noted.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's we put it out there that's what was in the stew, the cosmic stew, for you. But very interested about where this conversation is going to go today. I certainly didn't expect this album to come before us, and I'm raring to go to hear your argument. So, Sarah, without any further ado, please tell our listeners, what album hath thou brought before This One Goes to 11 tribunal today?
I have brought before the council today Death Cab for Cutie's Codes and Keys.
Codes and Keys. All right, Michael, initial thoughts. Come on.
Well, so this isn't, again, one of those sort of episodes where you hear the artist and you're like, oh, I know which album you're going to say.
Yeah. And
then the album you say is not the one I would have expected at all, actually. I mean, I could, to be TBH, as the kids say, I could have thought of like three that I would have thought you would have said before Codes and Keys,
For sure.
to be honest.
Well, it's because, they're an iconic artist and they have so many good albums. I'm not surprised that there are others.
Yes, and I do think it's the first Death Cab album that's been nominated, but not the first Ben Gibbard album.
That checks.
Yeah, I think Postal Service was on someone's list, and we haven't done that yet. But that's again on that list of albums that'll probably happen at some point. So
for sure. So we're getting into the lore already, as the Swifties like to say. The Swifties are all about lore, and so But for those of you out there who may not know Death Cab for Cutie and may not know Ben Gibbard and his body of work, as we like to say, we have a very convenient segment for you to get caught up. Michael, what's that segment called?
That segment is called The Beginner's Guide to Death Cab for Cutie's Codes and Keys in 60 seconds.
And you're doing it today, aren't you?
I sure am, and I'm hoping. I'm hoping. I don't know. I think I got this one all smushed in. It's tricky doing the research. I honestly did not realize how many albums they had released at this point. So it was sort of like, oh, I got more to cover than I thought.
So, Sarah, as you build your case for this album's perfection, this is your first opportunity to grade Michael on the job that he does, condensing this artist down into 60 seconds and this album. So just start thinking about whatever terms you want to put that in. But Michael is more than up for the task, in my opinion.
Perfect.
I do want to preface, just so you know, because of some of the research that I've come across for this album, please do not judge my summary based on some of the critique that gets quoted within the summary. That is all I will say.
Heard. Absolutely.
Because there's a specific thing I want to talk about with this album, but yeah. Anyway, okay.
That's enough preface.
I'm going to stop prefacing. Okay. All right.
All right. I've got 60 seconds on the clock. You ready?
I sure am.
We're starting in 3, 2, 1.
Holy Urban Outfitters, y'all. It's indie pop darlings Death Cab for Cutie. Formed in 97 in Bellingham, Washington by Ben Gibbard, who was recording under the name All Time Quarterback, the band took their name from a song by the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band. In 2001, they had their first charting single, A Movie Script Ending, which would later appear on the TV show The OC. Their big break, 2003's Transatlanticism, and 2 years later, they would sign to Atlantic and release Plans, though they felt super guilty about it and still encouraged their fans to download their music any way they could. Their seventh album, 2011's Codes and Keys, was an intentional departure from their guitar-centric sound, influenced by David Bowie's Low, LCD Sound System, and British electronic group Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark. Critics described it as a bit sunnier and more impressionistic than what fans might expect. Pop Matter's own Evan Saudi said it was, quote, the sound of Death Cab at their most generic, disjointed, and disinterested. Gibbard himself ranks the album at the bottom of all the records he's recorded. But the band is still alive and kicking. After a new album in 2021, they toured with the Postal Service to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the release of Transatlanticism and Give Up.
Count it. I think that you were in there. That was enough trailing language. I'm going to count that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'm in the pocket.
So, Sarah, how did he do? Shade aside, trying to compartmentalize any internal shade that was included in that intro. How do you feel like our friend Michael did?
No, I feel like even the shade, honestly, I don't judge anybody or feel any hate towards anyone who throws shade on this album, because it is absolutely a departure from their usual stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so for you, Michael, I give you a solid A+. I think that's
Okay.
excellent. I think you
All
did
right.
a good summary there. And, I certainly have my own responses to the critiques and why I think
That's
why
what
I
we
think
want.
that those are actually benefits or positives of the album, and
Mm-hmm.
why it is a personal favorite for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think that's I don't think any of that was invalid.
Okay. Good.
Yeah,
An A+, man. You can't do better than that, can you?
I'll take it.
I do love a good A+.
You're
10
like
points for
us.
Gryffindor, high marks all around.
Well, we will dive into that, and I do want to talk about specifically what draws you to this album, and what, like, how you go against the critics. But we're gonna get to that in a little bit, because first we got to talk about you, and we like to start with a very broad question. What is your relationship with music, past and present, writ large?
So my whole family is involved in the arts. My mother is a professional musician. Give her any instrument, she can master it in a month. I think right now she's working with, she has several mandolins, but no, it's a lyre. It starts with an L.
Oh, cool. A lute?
I wish I could
Is it a
remember.
lute?
A lute or a lyre?
Thank you so much. It's a lute.
Okay.
Yes,
Ooh,
lyre
it's a
is,
lute.
I think, very different from a lute, but yes.
But also an instrument.
20,000
Yes,
points to your
yes.
mom for "Gimme the Lute."
She gets all the points, truly. And I think she's got 37 Baroque flutes, specifically Baroque flutes. Like,
Oh, interesting.
she's just absolutely wild. So I was exposed to a lot of different kinds of music, but mostly of the classical genre.
Huh, okay.
And then the Beatles. That was kind of like what I grew up on. I always say I grew up on Beethoven and the Beatles. And so that was just always around me. And she works in our local church. So religious music was a constant in my life. I think I can still, if a hymn is playing in a TV series or something, I can be like, oh yeah, I remember that one.
Oh, yeah.
No words, just the melody. I'm like, yeah, that sounds familiar.
Those "How Great Thou Art" comes in, and you're just like, oh,
That's too contemporary.
Oh, really?
Tyler.
Okay.
We're talking like the
Oh.
hymnal from 1860 whatever. Like,
yeah.
yeah.
Some, like, madrigals going on over there.
Yes, absolutely. So that was always around me. And of course, they're all theater artists. So we have every Tony winning album CD in my mom's music closet, which is extensive. And yeah, that was kind of what I was around growing up. And then once I was able to drive and listen to whatever radio station I wanted to listen to,
Yeah.
I certainly evolved my own tastes, mostly leaning towards indie rock, alternative rock. But I love anything that can touch my soul. And that's, everything has that possibility.
You mentioned briefly just about, like, once you were able to drive. I feel like we don't talk enough on this podcast about listening to music in the car.
We don't.
Because I mean, like, that was so much of my, my teenage years when I was, still in the closet, well, still figuring out that I was gay. But, like, I used to go on drives in the family car and play music really loud, because the music was the only thing that understood me. But, like,
you could be gay in the car. Yeah.
Well, that I think that might mean something else, Tyler. But but like the freedom of being able to just, like, blare music so loud and play whatever you want, whether it's your own radio station or some sort of mix you've made to play in the car. Like, there's something
all the time.
Something liberating about when you can drive and what that does for your connection to music.
Totally.
Michael's a noted mixtape maker. He is
Oh.
he's just like, this is one of the best things about him. You strike me as somebody who probably did that too. Am I wrong?
Oh yeah. Different
Yeah.
mixes and like different mixes of the mixes, right?
Ooh.
Where it was a different order of the same or similar songs depending on what mood I wanted to be in, what story I wanted to tell.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Did you have a disc what's the Case Logic?
Yep.
You know, the little
think we had
booklet envelope
one-
thing.
I think we have one that would fit on the visor. And so it could only
nice.
hold, like 5 or 6, but I was like, that's all I need. I just need those. Need my essentials.
What were some of the songs you were putting on mixtapes all the time in high school?
Daylight by Matt and Kim. That is an excellent song to drive to. That is like freedom in 2 minutes and 34 seconds.
What happened to Matt and Kim? Where are they?
I don't know, but that's still one of my favorite songs.
Oh,
if I need a good pick me up, it is that song.
That especially the beginning of it is kind of iconic for that aughts indie sound.
Oh yeah.
What else? What else was on there?
I'm trying to think what else. Sleepyhead. I can't remember who.
Passion Pit.
Passion Pit. Thank you so much.
Hell
I knew
yeah.
it started with a P. There was another one by Passion Pit that I liked a lot too. Lay Me Down. Who
Lay Me Down.
did that one? I know I have it on my Spotify playlists too. 'Cause that's a great one to drive to.
This is fun because I like asking these kinds of questions because I find out who my friends now are that I definitely would have hung out with in high school if we had gone to high school together.
Oh
And
yeah, we would have hung out.
We would have confirmed.
Lay Me Down is by the Dirty Heads.
The Dirty Heads. I don't know that.
Yeah. Sorry, now I've got the whole thing. Weezer, I Want You To.
There you go.
Huh.
That's a good one. Yeah. All right, I'm done talking about my high school mix CD.
Before we move on, I would like to egregiously name drop when you mentioned Passion Pit. I just like to say that Passion Pit reminds me of the time that I assistant directed Rachel Chafkin in a production on the West Coast when she directed something at the Old Globe, and we drove to LA to go see a performance one night, and she listened to Passion Pit like almost the entire way. So okay,
Really?
I'm done name dropping now.
I like that.
I'll give you 10,000 points for Michael. Michael doesn't name drop a lot, so you spurred something. You spurred something in him for sure.
I'd just like to also go on record as saying that she is whip smart.
Really?
Dear listeners, if you don't know who Rachel Chafkin is, she won the Tony Award for directing Hadestown. She has a new musical on Broadway called Lempicka, I believe. And she is she deserves all the accolades she gets. She is ridiculously smart, shrewd, and super clear. She's awesome. Anyway, okay.
I like
stepping off my soapbox.
Well, how about we talk about Death Cab then? That's a perfect transition. I'm assuming Death Cab was on those mixtapes as well. What do you remember about your first meetings with Death Cab? The discovery of this album or the artist in general?
Yeah, funnily enough, the only song from Death Cab that might have been on that mix was Meet Me at the Equinox because it was on the Twilight New Moon soundtrack.
Okay, yeah. We have not talked about those soundtracks much either. Those are kind of game changers, weren't they?
Soundtracks slap.
Yeah,
they
did.
You can't put Supermassive Black Hole on a track, on an album, and not do well.
And that scene that it's in the movie is utterly
the baseball scene.
Baseball. 1,000,000 points for the Twilight baseball scene. That might have been brought up at some point on this podcast, but if it isn't, then it. Michael, are you familiar with what we're talking about?
No, not. I've not seen a Twilight. Yeah.
Oh God,
that's all right.
You're in for something.
Yeah, it's a cultural moment, and I do recommend just for the sake of the cultural moment. But I get it.
I mean, I appreciate that song. I'm a big Muse fan.
Incredible song.
I'm a big Muse. early Muse fan. Their later stuff, I'm kind of I don't know what the hell's going on with them right now. But
So just Meet Me at the Equinox. That was your entry point, huh?
Yeah, that was my entry point. And then and I knew of them. I mean, everybody knew I Will Possess Your Heart and their 6-minute long intro, which is incredible.
Yeah.
And but actually getting to know them as an artist was because of my first college boyfriend who introduced me to a lot of my now favorite bands. He's a big, big, big music guy. Was one of those people that could, hear a song playing in the background of a store and be like, "Oh, that's a 6/4/8/4 chord progression," just like one of those people.
Yeah, that's cute.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, so this album came out I think in 2011, and we were dating at the time, and they were going on tour with Frightened Rabbit as their opener, and Frightened Rabbit is another one of his and now my favorite bands.
Yeah.
And so we went to Pittsburgh to go see them. And actually, here I'm gonna not really name drop, but like experience drop. We were going to the Pittsburgh concert for his birthday, but they were going to be in Columbus, which is near my hometown, before that. And so we thought, oh, well, we should just go to that one. But he was actually going to be elsewhere with his family. So I messaged Frightened Rabbit on Facebook, and they were still new enough. I know. They were still new enough that they were absolutely responding to people. I said, hey, you're coming to my town. I can't go to the concert, but I'm going to be there later. Can I get something to you to sign for my boyfriend for his birthday?
Oh.
And he was like, yeah, come by the stage door at 4 p.m. or something, and like you can meet us. And so I got to hang out with them for a little bit. I got to listen to Death Cab for Cutie soundcheck.
Ooh.
This is an experience drop.
It was a great experience. And then had a big sign that said "Happy Birthday, Cameron," and they all signed it. And had one of their albums, and they all signed that too. And then got a photo with them and gave it to my boyfriend for his birthday. And then at the concert in Pittsburgh, they had like their merch table, and we said hello, and they recognized me, and they were super cool.
Okay,
I love them. Yeah,
50,000 points for sliding into Frightened Rabbit's DMs before that was before that was even a thing.
Yep.
But you saw them on this tour. This is so cool. This is so crazy because I feel like this it's connecting a lot of dots here. Why this is your Death Cab album? If this was the first one that you really was the
live
point in their career at which you came to know them, right? That tracks a ton.
Yeah. And then actually the main reason that it became a big winner for me was when that boyfriend dumped me.
Okay.
And absolutely shattered my heart.
Bastard.
Part of the recovery process when I was starting, I had like felt my sad girl feelings and was starting to kind of see the light. It was also spring in Ohio. And so it's finally getting warmer and the sun is coming out. And I'm walking to class in the morning and it's actually light outside. Yeah. And I would listen to this album. And I feel like this album has such a unique arc of starting in kind of a despairing, lonely place and moving into this hopeful human connection is everything place. And so it was like a part of my healing journey. And that's when I really, really, really fell in love with the album.
Nice. You reclaimed it. It was yours again.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Spring in Ohio also sounds like a Death Cab song title.
Yeah, it does.
I'm giving you 15,000 points for Spring in Ohio.
Thanks.
This is also, if I did my research correctly, this is also the album that they made while Ben Gibbard was married to Zooey Deschanel, if I'm not mistaken.
You probably know better than me.
Which I think, maybe that kind of explains the sort of like hopeful arc.
Yeah.
Which might also explain why some of the critics were like this isn't
boo, be sad.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Because I feel when you talked about a breakup, I was like, oh, well, yeah, that's Death Cab for you. Like that's Death Cab music. But yeah, this is, even though this does have kind of a moody feel to it. I mean, there's one of the other influences I didn't mention. They also felt like they were influenced by Brian Eno, like super electronic. And you wouldn't think that this would be their like hopeful, optimistic album, but that is kind of what the journey is of the whole thing.
Yeah.
In preparing for this, I did watch a few of the solo shows that Ben has done with KEXP on YouTube. Those are really good. The like live in studio concerts that they have. it's funny that he has this reputation as kind of like the banner holder for the sad boy hipster from the
Yeah.
late 90s, early aughts, because he is very, like, he's super engaging. He's not closed off in a way that a lot of other similar singer-songwriter guys are from that era. I guess this maybe leads me into like what, with the band themselves, like Ben and the rest of the band, did you feel like you established a relationship with them as artists individually through this, or was that not really a way you think about it? Like, how did it go, I guess?
Yeah, I think, and what I actually find so unique and interesting about this album, listening to a lot of their earlier stuff, they're telling really specific, clear stories. From their perspective, their singular, but like, presumably Ben's perspective, but from whoever's perspective. I started thinking about the day that you left because I went into my glove compartment and saw a picture of you. Like, it's a really specific story.
Yeah.
Whereas this album, I feel like, is so open to individual interpretation, to the audience's interpretation. There's, there are certainly specific elements and details, but they're speaking more to general experiences, coming back to your hometown and feeling like a stranger, and not knowing what to do, being so overwhelmed by the outside world, you can't leave your apartment. That I feel like it allowed me to see myself in their music instead of, oh yeah, I remember being broken up, by listening to like their perspective and their stories. I was able to find what resonated with me and my personal life in their music.
That's cool. I mean, I think that's really valid. Like, I think there is some element of, we talk about this a lot, especially with the like most successful artists out there today, your Taylor Swifts, your Beyoncés, and all that kind of thing. Like, how there is so much of that personality thing that we're zeroing in on. Maybe it's the social media aspect. Maybe it's like the access that we feel like we have to them. But with somebody who's been around as long as Ben has, and as long as this band has been making music, they've straddled eras, I think.
Yeah.
In terms of how we establish relationships with artists. So I think that's a really well made point.
Yeah, and artists grow older too, because I mean, I think like my connection to the band came from when someone sent me the video for a movie script ending, which is like, oh dear God, like I have a hard, crunchy exterior, but it's all soft and gushy inside, and like that video appeals to the soft and gushy side of me. But it just, like, during that era, that's when I was shopping at Urban Outfitters. I did consider myself like the nerdy indie rock boy, and of course everything that they were saying and singing about spoke to me. But like now, they're adults. You can't be that kind of nerdy indie rock boy all your life. You have to grow into you have to go into nerdy indie rock dad.
Nerdy indie rock adult. Yes.
Exactly. Yes.
Which he really is. He's big dad vibes now, isn't he?
He's like ultra marathoner too. Did you know that?
I did. I like that about him.
Of course you did. You're like you're training right now. Yeah.
Yeah. You got some Death Cab on your running playlist?
Well, I am going to be running across the Bixby Canyon Bridge. So I mean,
you gotta.
There's Death Cab connections galore. It's gonna be. It's gonna be. It wasn't on purpose that happened, but it is funny that we are recording today. And speaking of it, Narrow Stairs is my Death Cab album. I
do love Narrow Stairs. Yeah,
it's a good album, and I feel like there's actually a lot of, because that came out. When did that one? That came out 3 years prior, and I feel like there's Codes and Keys does feel like a logical progression from Narrow Stairs in whichever way you want to look at it, whether it is a step in the right direction or a sidestep or whatever, however you want to critique it. I do feel like there is a lot of musical connective tissue just in the sort of, I feel those references you made to Lowe and Brian Eno, I can see that a lot in the sound here.
I mean, it feels like this album to me, this was a thought I just had while making dinner tonight, was I thought this is if Death Cab made a Postal Service album, this is what it would be.
Oh,
I like that. Yeah, actually, that's
Mhm.
pretty great.
We've been talking about all this music. It feels like we should listen to some music. So,
Yeah.
Sarah, would you mind telling us what you've chosen as your standout track from Codes and Keys?
I have chosen Underneath the Sycamore, which to me is
Oh,
kind of this
Don't say too much. Don't
Yeah,
say too
we'll
much.
have you
We're
explain
gonna listen
after.
to it first, and then we can talk more about it on the other side. Dear listeners, if you're listening to us on Spotify or our YouTube playlist, you're gonna hear the entire track. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, you're gonna hear a wee snippet of the song. But regardless, we'll see you on the other side.